You to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as bad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here tonight on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about, but what's the point? We're all going to die. That was the meme on the internet that we have broke. The internet has freaked out. We're all going to die. It's over. The gig's over. Global warfare is upon us. The craziest person you could possibly imagine, the neocon of neocons, which I got to be honest, I thought the neocons had been, kind of shoved to the back of the shelf, kind of pushed away from mainstream messaging, but nope, not today. H.R. McMaster fired, and in comes warmonger John Bolton. Him and his giant mustache. Look, I'm not surprised by it. Was not surprised at all. In fact, called it, a week ago. Said, it's going to happen because it seems like anybody who was on Fox News is now going to be moved into the administration because evidently they're all freaking out. They're all tired of being part of the propaganda network from some of the reports that we're hearing. They need a new job, and the new job will be destroying the world. That's it. That's it. No sense going on any further. It is the end. And today you had President Trump musing on what it would be like not to have a chief of staff. So not only did he go today with the craziest person possible to be National Security Advisor, which evidently no one has to confirm, he's actually talking about one of the few, and I hate to go with the sane and the rational, but one of the few somewhat sane and rational voices left into this administration, he's already talking about getting rid of. And that should, again, be one of those signals that makes us go, very, very afraid. Be very, very afraid. And I know there's some warmongers out there, some gun nuts going, yeah, we're going to take over the world. Yeah. Now, John Bolton, interesting figure. And again, it just seems to me how bizarre we have gotten in this country and how the ties to the Republican Party and really the far right of the Republican Party, the ties that they have with Russia. Because immediately you see an ad that John Bolton cut for this group called the Right to Bear Arms, which is a Russian gun group. And yes, there is a Russian gun group. And not surprising, being gun nuts, they have close ties with the NRA. Again, not surprising. And you look at this stuff and it just, I got to be honest. You look at this and you go, there's so much to this incestuous petri dish that all leads back to not just collusion, but to treason, that these people have sold their souls to the oligarch, and not just in Russia, but here as well, that the wealth class of this planet have really taken over and have given us someone like Trump. I mean, it's really scary stuff. And the only hope, and I keep coming back to, I need to have some hope. I need to, at least think that tomorrow is going to be a better day. If we can stave off the end of the world, maybe we can change it a little bit and make it better, which is why 2018 is so very important. Make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure you get out and vote in November. Make sure you participate in the primaries, because those are coming up too, because we would like to have sane, rational people that are running against the crazy people. We'd like to have an actual real choice. Just a thought. Wanted to throw that out there. But here's the thing. 2018 could be a landslide year for sanity. And I'm not even promoting the Democratic Party. I'm saying sanity. Let's promote sanity. Let's promote somebody who's not going to blow us up. And there's part of me that goes, even Trump sees this, because this is one of those things. He was at this Generation Next summit, and he was talking about his popularity, because everything really is about him, and understand that. He said, he doesn't know if his popularity is transferable. He goes, I don't know if it's transferable. They say a lot of it's not transferable. They like me. They may vote for me. And they all are saying that I'm going to do great in 2020. But they don't know if it's transferable. I hope it's transferable, because we have to get we have to do our agenda, he says. He goes, we have to win in 2018. We have to get the agenda. We need more Republicans. But not sure if it's transferable. And to me, there's kind of this moment where I think even he, as far off the deep end as he is, and as pathetic as his poll numbers are, and he seems to think they're great, I think even he's looking at this as I better hedge my bets. Because he doesn't want to make it about him. He doesn't want to make it about his coattails. He's going to push it off on, Saccone was a bad candidate. And he was, by the way. It's terrible. It's horrible. But I just think that, he's doing this to hedge his bets come November, when his party takes a real serious behind whipping. And it can only happen if we bother to show up and vote. And you look across the primaries that are in Illinois, they had a 30% higher turnout than they had in 2010. This is the sanity wing of America coming to vote. And in higher numbers than the crazy Tea Party did. And I've been saying, will there be that pendulum swing back to somewhere close to sanity? You had the Tea Party who took us way off to the extreme. Will this be kind of a righting of the ship? And to be honest, will we at some point, given all of the information that's now coming out, all of the breaking news around Cambridge Analytica, all of the stuff that we now find out about Facebook, all of the stuff that we actually knew, but we didn't really know. We now know. And, I'm now in the camp of, in looking at all of the stuff that's going on, I had taken a position for a long time that, it's possible that Trump didn't actually know. That, it was Kushner, it was the idiot son and the doofus son who were, blind ambition, absolute arrogance, complete ignorance, that they got sucked into this. I'm looking at how deep all of this stuff now goes, and I'm now in the position where I don't know that Trump couldn't have known, couldn't have not known. I just can't see that all of this was going on, numerous meetings and all of this coordination. I just don't know how he could not have known. And, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about the Cambridge Analytica stuff and what we need to know about that. But, I'm on this spot where I just don't get how he could not have known. It's just been an interesting day. I see Bolton as a huge distraction. I fear Wag the Dog is coming soon. Don't know if the Harris Summit's going to happen, if we're going to stop dropping bombs. I don't know if the Iran deal is going to be ripped up and maybe we start dropping bombs there. Who knows? With Bolton, there's nobody he doesn't want to bomb. Puppies, kittens, bomb them. Scary, scary stuff. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Scott Dworkin's going to be here, share some of his thoughts on the latest revelations on the Cambridge Analytica, the Russia scandal, the congratulatory phone call that everyone said, don't do! All that and so much more. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
10% of people own 90% of the wealth. Where do you fit in? Take a look at yourself. 10% of the people own 90% of the wealth.
Where smart policy and sound investment matters. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day the Equal Rights Amendment passed the U.S. Senate and moved to the states for ratification. It had passed the House the previous fall. Alice Paul and Crystal Eastman of the National Women's Party first wrote the ERA in the 1920s. It was introduced to Congress in 1923. The revised version that Congress passed in 1971 and 1972 stated simply, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. The amendment needed 38 states to ratify by March of 1979 in order to pass. 35 states ratified the amendment, but 5 states later rescinded ratification. The 38-state requirement was never met. The decades-long debate among women's rights advocates often centered on formal equality versus protective legislation for women workers. But an amendment establishing equality meant the end to restrictive discriminatory laws. These included laws imposing restriction on a woman's right to buy or sell property or to conduct a business, the age at which women could marry, differing admission standards for boys and girls in tax-supported educational institutions, laws establishing different jail sentences by sex for identical crimes, regulations denying unemployment compensation payments to pregnant women who are still able and willing to work, and much more. The far right and religious fundamentalists of all faiths fiercely opposed the ERA, fearing it would erode traditional gender roles. Many progressives and the labor movement also opposed it for many years on the basis that hard-won protective legislation would be lost. It is striking that, as of 2017, there is still no clear legal codification of women's equal status to men. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So John Dowd, the lead attorney for the Trump folks, out. And he was the voice saying, no, Donnie, don't do it. Don't testify. And, I guess almost minutes after Dowd left, Trump came out and said that he would like to indeed testify before Robert Mueller in the special counsel's investigation. And you go, way to go, Donnie. Good choice there. Even your attorneys are bailing on you. You know it's bad. You know it's bad when the attorneys are bailing. Just kind of a thought. Anyway, we're here to talk a little bit about that. Also, the breaking Cambridge Analytica stuff. Facebook, the whole 9 yards. Our good friend Scott Dworkin. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm good. Lots to get to today. What do you make of Dowd bailing?
Which part?
What do you make of him bailing? I mean,
of John Dowd?
Yeah.
Oh, I think that he probably thought he was at the end of the rope, or he made a bad call by accepting whatever Trump told him to do over the weekend, telling him to maybe fire Mueller or put it out there for him, and it backfired so much that he was just a liability. That's my guess.
And I would argue bringing in the other attorney, that was part of it as well.
And that's part of the whole Bolton and everything else, is he's getting people around him that are just yes men.
And crazy. I mean, I look at Bolton and, the internet blew up today that it's the end of the world. Bombing starts at 5 o'clock.
Right. And one thing that was interesting that I just discovered through our investigation is that there was a total of $5 million paid to John Bolton's super PAC from Robert Mercer, who is the co-founder of Cambridge Analytica. That same super PAC that John Bolton super PAC, they paid $1.1 million to Cambridge Analytica since 2014 or 2015. And so they not only were paid by Robert Mercer, they paid his company as well. And the biggest funders for John Bolton's super PAC since 2014 are Trump's biggest funders.
It seems a bit cozy, doesn't it?
It's a little too cozy for me. Yeah, I think I already started tweeting out the Fire Bolton hashtag, which I recommend everybody else do. You know, it's never too soon. You know, he hasn't even started the job yet. And, you know, my hope is that we don't actually, he never has a chance to start the job.
Yeah, I'm with you. But, you know, here's one of my problems with this. And the National Security Advisor is a fairly powerful position. It's one of the top 5 powerful positions. And it doesn't have to go through any type of confirmation process. So we can have someone as crazy as Bolton, and he is. I mean, he's a warmongering neocon. We can have him in a very powerful position without any oversight whatsoever.
Yeah, it's terrifying. And that you know, I don't think that he had to get confirmed for the UN job either. So, you know, he hasn't had to go through these strict confirmation fights. You know, we do have time before the April 9th start date to make sure that everything is uncovered. You know, I've already been in touch with dozens of reporters in regards to the follow the money there. And, you know, you see a lot of the same people funding the same stuff, and you wonder, you know, at what point are they just laundering money or doing something that's, you know, at this point, it's crazy. I couldn't believe it when I looked it up. I already knew about the expenses from Bolton, but the funding from Mercer to start it all, to start that super PAC and doing it, you know, 2014, 15, 16, 17, you know, and funding $5 million into it and then getting paid back $1.1 million via your own company. And John Bolton's in the middle of that, and it's surrounding Cambridge Analytica with everything that's going on right now, and the links to Russia just turning up. You know, Nix, who is the CEO of Cambridge Analytica, there were pictures that came out, or one picture that came out of him with the UK Russian ambassador in the UK, and so there are Russian links, absolutely, between Cambridge Analytica, and of course. You know, Steve Bannon is involved with all of this, and the rest of the gang.
So let me ask you this, because, you know, you look at, and as you pointed out, and the ties are run really deep with our wealth class, and I would argue our oligarch. You know, this isn't. I don't think this is really surprising to me, given the fact that you look at the Koch brothers, you look at Mercer, you look at some of these really huge political spenders. They've set up all of these kind of front groups and all of these groups to do all kinds of mischief, and I would argue used our tax dollars to do it. This is what giving them massive amounts of wealth and not taxing the hell out of them has gotten us.
Yeah, and you know, Cambridge Analytica, one thing that people don't know very well about it is it's just a shell company. That's just a put up from SCL Group, which is an international political group, but it's really interesting because they're not very big. Neither of the companies are gigantic, but what they do is very effective. But it just seems like they're the evil guys behind the curtains that were put together specifically to not just help Donald Trump win, but work with, you know, the North Carolina Republican Party, work with Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, work with Senator Ted Cruz. And so these people that they represent, they deserve to know, what did you buy from them? What did Cambridge Analytica give you? Do you have my data? Do you have my social security number? Do you have my bank account numbers? Do you know how much I'm worth? Do you have my cell phone number? Are you trying to ping my emails? Did you buy my CVS information? Do you have my prescription information? Do you know how many times I've been sick? Like, people start to realize, like, how much information do they really have? As a person who fundraised for over a decade in Dem politics, I can guarantee you it is terrifying how much information, you know, people in general have in politics. Not only that, but the nonprofit realm. You know, I always go with the assumption that everyone has my data. So I go ahead and back it up to make sure that my social security number is secure, and I get notified if somebody applies for credit for it or anything like that. I just assume the worst because they probably have much more information than anybody would ever feel comfortable with. And the sad thing is Facebook kind of let it happen.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's amazing. But what do you say to the person, Scott? And I'm getting this a lot from people emailing me going, well, you know what Trump did? Let's say he did. Let's say Cambridge Analytica did all of the horrible things that came out in the Channel 4 investigative piece. What's the difference between what Obama did in 2008 and 12 and what they got away with in 16? Because they were doing the same thing. They were using Facebook. They were sending out, you know, tons of targeted ads. What's the difference?
They knew. Those people knew. They signed up for it. They opted in. You know, they were not. We were not at any time assessing their mental capacity and trying to brainwash them. And that's what they were doing, is they were presenting them with an argument that wasn't always true, but they didn't care. And they wanted to play with people's emotions with lies. You know, and that's beyond the pale. What Obama's team did is they were able to micro-target people who had opted in to figure out where their leaning is and whatnot. But they were very transparent at a constant with that data and that information. And at no point was that sold or given away. And at the same time, they were very careful not to let anyone abuse it. I know that people, for example, there's been people who have taken their list and try to reach out to different donors. In different campaigns, we've thrown out even, you're allowed to do this, different donors that if they reach out to them, it's going to reach out to me, as in they got caught trying to scan a list. Like, we're very careful in the Democratic Party about our data and our donors, our volunteers, and their information. And it just seems like Republicans didn't care. They had access to the information that Facebook should have never given to them in the first place. And then they abused that information by collating it with other data sets. Because remember, Facebook is not the only organization online that was working out of the Trump offices. At the same time, Clinton denied any, they didn't want anybody in their offices, and there were full-time employees of Facebook inside of Trump's campaign offices at a constant.
And why were they there? I mean, yeah, that seems...
To teach them how to use the information at the best of their abilities to maximize what they had.
And to monetize.
Yeah, and this is already, a lot of this is going to come back to the fault. There's so many scandals out there. There's so much stuff going on. It's hard to really keep a grip on what's what. At the end of the day, with Facebook, Cambridge Analytica is going to get the blame for most of that, and Facebook hopefully will become a secure network. But you know, the trust, once that's gone, I'm not sure how they're going to have to come back. They'll probably have to rebrand.
Yeah, I mean, because look, when I stopped using Facebook, and it's been a couple of years since I've really put anything out. You know, we put our podcasts up, but I don't do any real engagement there. Yeah. It was, I remember the day. I can tell you exactly what it was. We went to sign up for something, and it said, you know, click this link to allow us to have all of your pictures and all of your contacts and all of this. And I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. Click, goodbye. And that's part of how all of this stuff, you know, began. They gave away not just your information, but if I followed you, they gave my information away through you.
Sold. I want to make sure that that's clear. They sold our information, which is worse. You know, and at some point, I think that they were able to, you know, realize that they had given away too much information. But at the same time, I started getting a little scared. I'll tell you in reverse. Through our investigations into individuals for the Russia scandal, we've found dozens of pieces of evidence from people who are targets of the investigation on their Facebook accounts and social media accounts where they got caught lying to law enforcement officers because of what's on their social media site. One of the things that Papadopoulos did was he deleted his Facebook account, which they were able to recover, and started a new one to try and hide his messages, which is then constant guilt. Anyways, this is something that's been going on for a while, and I haven't been using Facebook. I've maybe posted 3 times in the past year, maybe a little bit more, but very infrequently, because I don't know who's looking at it at any given point. And people need to know they're looking at every shot that you have public. Those pictures are theirs forever. They're on the internet at a constant forever. Anything you're tagged in, people are able to not just predict what you're going to vote for. They're able to predict what you're going to buy at the grocery store. What are you going to have what are you going to order in regards to a movie? For takeout, do you want Chinese food or do you want Italian? Like, they're able to predict things like that. So, you know, when you get pop-up ads on your screen, we've caught different corporations doing this where we'll say something out loud and there'll be ads literally on our phone that relate to that certain subject. So there's fishy stuff going on everywhere. I think this is, again, a tip of another iceberg. And that's the thing here is all of this madness that's going on. These are all just the tips of the icebergs. And there's just massive icebergs all around him everywhere. And he's just kind of, you know, nudging them away. Trump, that is.
Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing. But, you know, what you're talking about is much deeper than just you know, Cambridge Analytica hooking up with Russian trolls to bring us, you know, divisions that we've already had in our society. This is getting into the deep recesses of your mind. And if you look at the video, you know, the guy was very clear. He said, you know, campaigns aren't about facts.
Right.
It's about emotion, and
right.
they're selling the emotion.
Right. And you know, I would say that, again, the intent is sinister on their end. They're trying to trick people. Obama and his folks were not trying to trick people. They were trying to win them over. It's a completely different premise. When you're trying to present the argument, they're trying to force the argument upon you through fear of battering the opponent, which is something that everyone does. I get it. But this is at a level of, you know, brainwashing where they want you to hate Hillary, and they'll have ads that target you to try and divide you from this person to that. And it worked a lot of the times, and we were not prepared for it. So, you know, my organization started to fight foreign influence, and we're one of the only groups that exists in the world that actually fights foreign influence at a constant. And we didn't realize we were doing it. But, you know, when you push back against hashtags that are trending from Russia, and I'm like, what's going on here? Like, I don't like how they're trying to trend GOP shutdown and Schumer shutdown so that we don't trend Trump shutdown. And that backlashed into millions of tweets. We were learning how to deal with it. We're learning how not to be tricked. And we're catching up with what needs to be done in regards to our personal security. We need to realize that everything that we do on the internet affects our real life. Everything that's hitting us in regards to hacks, it will affect your real life. And so we need to accept that fact and realize that we're not going to be played, and we need to make new laws to safeguard this from ever happening again.
No, I'm right there with you, because the other question I was going to ask you, you know, in looking at this election in 2016, you know, I had a lot of people say, look, you know, Trump was just using and the Russians were just using what is obvious to a political observer, that there are real true divisions in this country, and really bad ones that they just capitalized on and played to the worst of us. So really the enemy isn't the Russians or Trump, the enemy's us.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely say that. You know, I think that we definitely took the internet for granted and didn't realize, you know, how openness of the internet would affect us and how people would take advantage of it and try to abuse it. And you know, I guess we have to expect the worst from people a lot of times, and we just weren't prepared. At the same time, I think there's a responsibility of the companies that host any social media platform to educate its users on what's happening. And I think the lack of transparency in regards to who's paying for what ads and what's being presented where and what's fake news and what's not, you know, all of that is going to change. And that's a big, big shift. So I think that over time, we'll obviously recover, but people, again, need to realize everything that's happened. The Russians are attacking us at a constant, not just online, And the funny thing is, I said this 2 years ago, but at the same, how crazy I must have sounded at that point. The Russians are attacking us. They're all funded. Blah, 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 blah. Like, I remember some of the things that I was saying, and I replay some of these videos, and I'm like, look at that smart guy. But it really, it really took some guts from a lot of American patriots to stand up against this. And I don't think it would have gotten so bad that Trump would have just rampaged through this country and destroyed us all. I mean, that really is what would have happened. Luckily, we have Americans who stood up in the resistance. Saturday, we'll be March for Our Lives with the kids from Parkland. And there's a lot of great things going on that I think will change this country. I think the backlash from this, the progressive backlash is, I don't want to say the word revolution, but that's what it is, a peaceful revolution of sorts, where people realize, oh, my voice matters. Oh, my vote matters, Alabama, Connor Lamb. Like, my vote matters, my voice matters, and what I do with that vote actually can change things. I don't need to put up these people in charge. I can actually run for office.
Yep.
And it's really inspiring to see people take to it. And marching is cool now. Fighting against gerrymandering is cool now. Like, we've been begging people for years to try and take the census serious, and it's cool to be an activist again, which is just amazing for America, because we need it, the world needs it, and everybody's depending on us to make sure that we can make it through this alive.
Yeah, and save the world in the process. I look at this, and you were saying the marching and all of that. I hope that people will start marching for better wages, hours, conditions. I would love to see a lot of this stuff find the labor part of it, because it comes back to the money. I mean, I look at how much we as a working class have surrendered to the wealth class of this country, and how the Mercers of the world and the Koch brothers of the world and all of these billionaires are using that wealth against us.
Yeah, it's stunning. It's kind of crazy what they're trying to accomplish. It is so evil. They're trying to push the religious values down our throats through legislation.
Don't you think that's a diversion, though, Scott? I mean, it's to keep us pitted against each other. I mean, because the wealth class has always been masterful at pitting us against one another. Don't you think that's just kind of a way to keep everybody either stupid or at each other's throats?
I think it's both that, and people are literally that crazy about thinking that they're going to drive people to them and they're right and everybody else is wrong. But I mean, like, these are ideas of, like, thinking that white men should be in charge. And like the wealth should go to the wealthy and they'll trickle it down. Like, it's a lot of deranged things that don't actually work, that just make them more wealthy. So I think you're right, where they want to cause that divide. And it's kind of like when you're a scumbag, like, you'll let anyone give you money from anywhere. You'll let anyone give you help from anywhere. And if you have no values, eventually that's going to come back in your face. I would assume that it's going to backlash.
Let's hope this is that moment. Let me bring this back to Trump, because part of my fear now is that Cambridge Analytica is going to be the bad guy. I'm sure that there are, as you pointed out, there are ties between them, Bolton, the Russians, Mercer, the oligarch. There's part of me that's concerned that this becomes, it's their fault, and that Trump ends up being able to walk away from this. As I'm looking at this, and you've been saying this for a while, this is a cause for impeachment. This is, rises to the level of treason. Do you see any possibility that Cambridge Analytica is where it ends and it doesn't rise to Trump?
So I think the Guccifer 2.0 article that just came out that confirms that it is a Russian intelligence officer, that's a link directly to Roger Stone. He was connected with them during the campaign. You're going to see the American actors, the people who are actually in touch with the Russians, come out in the next week, and it's going to solidify this thing. Cambridge Analytica, maybe they're the evil guys now, but they're just a bridge. And I think that, and they're also just another iceberg that's kind of separate, but at the same time together. But when you see these people lined up with their different scandals, Jared Kushner, Don Jr., Trump himself, Roger Stone, and on, and the people who are testifying against them, these people are not flipping on nobody. These people are not turning on nobody. They're not making deals for nothing. And so these are federal charges where you would go to prison for decades if you were charged alone. And that's why they're flipping. So what are they giving that? What is that information they're giving up? Because that is the valuable source. So I don't believe, again, you're going to hear this is all going to be flipped on its head pretty soon. And I think it's just going to spew out. People are going to start, talking, and it's just going to be, it's going to be bad for America for a little bit, but it'll be good for us in the long run.
Yeah, in the long run. But one of the things I did want to bring up is, while Cambridge Analytica now is the focus, they're not alone. There are other groups. This is Mercer's group. The Koch brothers have this I-360. There are all of these think tanks and all of these attack groups, Americans for Prosperity, Freedom Works. You can go down the list of the billionaire front groups who are all doing this kind of stuff to tear us apart and to weaponize our fears.
Yeah, and we've been trying to fight back. As my group is a coalition, but it's more grassroots based. And when you don't have to depend on people's money to do what you need to do, it makes things different. I don't think that people are going to buy what they're selling as much anymore because they're not going to have, they'll figure out a new way to do it, is what I'm saying. They have money, they'll develop new ways to trick us into voting a certain way or do something different. And we need to make sure that the laws change so this dirty money is out of politics. I run, one of the better, I would say, or best super PACs that exist, Democratic Coalition Against Trump. I hate super PACs. I despise super PACs. They should not exist. But we exist because it is the best fit. It's kind of like we have to fight them on their level. And we're doing that every single day. It's very hard to comprehend why we need all of this money in politics, because it's just too easy to get bought. It's and it's too easy to cover up the funds. I mean, we could, a super PAC could essentially get paid by an LLC, and you don't know where that money actually comes from, and you'll never know. Yeah, and that's terrifying because that can be foreign money.
And that's the other part of it. That's really scary. But for me, the transparency part is extremely important. And then there's the second part. We should go back to a tax code like we had during the good socialist President Dwight David Eisenhower's era, so that we don't have all of these uber wealthy billionaires that we've created through lack of investment of education, healthcare, infrastructure, all of that stuff, who have all of this disposable money to cause mischief with.
Yeah, I mean, like, why aren't we paying teachers more? Why aren't we paying police officers a reasonable salary? Like, we'll have better police officers. They're going to be smarter. They're going to be better trained. You know what I mean? It's all a trickle-down effect. When we don't have money to pay for city services, it affects us all. It causes more crime. It causes more fire. It causes more police and ambulance. Like, it's a stack of, like, it starts to dominoes fall. So when you see these teachers, they're going to start striking across the country because they get paid nothing, and they just want to get paid a little bit more. You're talking about these billionaires could probably fund those teachers for an entire year easily. The pay salary difference, they don't want to. Nope. And I don't know why, but besides the fact that they just want more money themselves. And I never have understood that. I've never understood how people can be that greedy. I've worked for billionaires and millionaires before, and I've seen them accumulate wealth at a certain time, but most of those guys gave a lot of their money away. I don't understand how people like Trump can live with themselves when there's so many people in America alone dying, just dying because they don't have enough money. Yeah. And we have a responsibility to our citizens to keep them not only safe, but comfortable. You can't live a free life if you're dying and you need health care. You can't live a free life if you don't have a job and you have no money, I'm
right there with you.
It's not there. So I think we need to reset as Americans, realize that we don't need a serial philanderer out there in charge. A person who it just came out now had a 10-month-long affair, another night of unprotected sex, at least 50 occurrences is what she said, where they met up. And this is the same time frame as Stormy Daniels. And so you've got this sort of person, plus the 21 women that have accused him of sexual assault, plus the different things with Russia, the payoffs, plus and then you keep on stacking it up. And it just seems like where have we gone as Americans, and where the heck is the Republican Party when you need them?
And there's the question. The silence is deafening. Scott, I appreciate the time, the thoughts. I look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you, Rick.
Good stuff. I appreciate it. Our good friend, Scott Dworkin, co-founder of the Democratic Coalition. Also, podcaster, the Dworkin Report. You might want to check that out as well. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1941. That was the day that the generators began to operate at one of the most massive construction projects ever built, the Grand Coulee Dam. The dam generates hydropower from the Columbia River in Washington state. The completed structure is the largest concrete dam in the world. It's 550 feet tall at its highest point and only 57 feet shy of being a mile wide. The dam is a massive 450 feet thick at its base, tapering to 30 feet at the top. It contains nearly 3 times the concrete of the famed Hoover Dam. 8,000 people attended the opening ceremony. They were led in a parade by the Grand Coulee High School marching band. But not everyone celebrated the dam. The project submerged fishing sites and burial grounds sacred to Native Americans. One area it submerged was Kettle Falls, a place where Native Americans are thought to have fished for 7,000 years. The project also took its toll on its workers. 77 men died while building the dam. One was Gerald Cobble, a 32-year-old worker who was struck and killed by a heavy steel bucket. During the tough times of the Great Depression, men had flocked to Washington in hopes of landing a job. Thousands found work on the project. The workers labored by shifts around the clock to construct the massive foundation. The Coulee Dam became known as the biggest thing on Earth and inspired this song by Woody Guthrie.
Well, the world has 7 wonders.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Towers, I guess you know them well. But now the greatest wonder is in Uncle Sam's fair land. It's that King Columbia River and the big Grand Coulee Dam.
The most important issues of the day. Most important issues of the day. This is the Rick Smith Show.
I got news for you. It's going down. Before you come home and tell me you're not angry, and I'll be leaving.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So still the big story of the day. Obviously, H.R. McMaster out the door. Not sure where he's going to go. Maybe get that 4th star. Who knows? But the crazy one is in. And not surprising. Look, the crazier the people were on Fox News, I think the faster they're going to fill up the administration. And John Bolton as National Security Advisor. As one tweet I said, now we're all dead. And I don't know where do you go from there. I'm here to share some of his thoughts, not just on that, but everything else going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. Bob Ney, Talk Media News. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. This is a dark day. Day.
That's kind of the thought. I'm going, it's almost surreal because I thought this would be the guy that not even Trump would go, yeah, let's let him out of the cage.
I mean, he's tried before, and even the Trump administration didn't take him in. I was commenting last week this wouldn't happen. I used to joke that if the kids misbehaved, a picture of John Bolton would be put in front of their faces. This is your babysitter. I have met with him personally. He came over to meet me in my office in Congress because he knew that I had supported the new moderate government before Ahmadinejad that there should be some communication. You know, Ahmadinejad was, you know, out of his mind, but there should be some communication. And he came over to meet with me, and he's just a scary, horrible human being. Horrible. You know, this is the kind of guy that would bomb Canada because maybe in 50 years from now it gets out of control. He's been a nightmare. I seriously cannot believe. Well, I take that back. Nobody will work there anymore, and nobody else would ever hire Bolton. So maybe the combination worked.
It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. If the career people end up fleeing, because as I remember, he's the guy who said you could blow the top 10 floors off the UN and nobody would care or notice. And you know, that's the mentality, and that's again with the last words in Trump's ear that come out his mouth kind of thing that goes on. I don't want Bolton near the ear. Does that make sense?
Right. It's sad. You know, when we were connecting here, I honestly, Rick, thought you remembered some things I've said from previous broadcasts and just were literally just teasing me. I literally thought it was a joke. I can't believe it. What a horrible mistake.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Bob. November 2016 forward, horrible nightmare. Thought it was a mistake. So nothing surprises me anymore. It's almost impossible for me to go, wow, that's surprising. I'm literally at that level right now.
Well, this did it for me. There's no more. This is a surprise. I mean, there's some things I've agreed with, and the tariffs, but Bolton is a dangerous, very dangerous human being. Very dangerous. Yeah, no question about it.
So now, do you think that with him as the advisor, do you think the Harris summit happens with North Korea?
I don't know how it could. I mean, this guy is so radical. I don't know. I guess if he lasts, it'll be a question mark. I don't know if he will or not. Now, if my memory serves me correct, that position does not require Senate approval.
I don't think so.
Because if it did, Bolton would not, honestly, would not get approved.
No, that would be one of those 98 to 2 kind of things, maybe.
Right. That position doesn't require it.
It's well, like I said, interesting times, and and I don't know why he chose today to step all over his tariffs, and I just don't know. I don't know why Trump chose today to fire McMaster, and I keep wondering, what about the rest of them? I mean, I haven't heard anything from Mattis. Maybe Mattis is going to be going soon. Who knows? So I guess the other thing is, should we start a countdown clock to find out how long Bolton stays?
Well, I hope it's not too long, like maybe 2 or 3 hours, and then he'll be like the Mooch, Scaramucci. Maybe
he start the 15-minute club. Nice.
Boltamucci, right? Maybe, because he will do things. You know, he will do things.
Yeah. Well, again, it's all about the ratings, right? It's all about the ratings.
They had to have told the president, no, not this one. No, not this one. Anything else, not this one. And he just did it.
Don't you think that the staffers should have an idea of how Trump works? Like I've been saying, maybe get 2 stamps. Like Obama would have done this and Obama wouldn't have done this. And then however you want him to go, do the opposite. Well, Obama wouldn't have done this, so you probably should. I mean, at some point, that just seems to be how the 2-year-old mentality is.
Yeah, well, I don't know. This one's
scary stuff.
Me. Because Kelly was frankly, General Kelly, I think, was a good choice as chief of staff. He attempted, at least was a piece of glue, in a bad situation. And he stepped in to actually make some decisions about even some of the family members, in the clearances, for example. This one, I don't know if Kelly went along with it or not. I can't imagine even Kelly going along with Bolton.
So maybe the Kelly watch is what we should be looking for to find out how much longer he lasts. I mean, isn't this interesting that we run the most powerful country in the world, the wealthiest country in the world at its wealthiest point in history, with the most nuclear weapons and the largest army? Isn't it fun to run this just by the seat of our pants? Just kind of wing it.
I know, but you know, John Bolton is just, you know, crazy as crazy does, and that's what he is. I mean, he's recognized worldwide as, you know, completely gone.
Yep.
Worldwide.
And all you have to do is look at him. I mean, you go, yeah, that. I mean, stay away from that. Kids, don't take candy from that guy.
There's conservatives that are afraid of him. Okay. All right.
Yeah, when the crazy people, when the asylum is running from you, yeah, that's a good point too.
Wow. Okay.
Let's move.
I'm speechless, and that's rare for me.
Wow. Let's move along. The tariffs today, evidently, this is, I guess, the first of what Trump is saying, many tariffs to come. Am I getting this right?
Right, and you know, you and I have talked about tariffs and free trade and fair trade for a long time now on your show. And in this case, you know, today I was asked, you know, station after station, well, the stock market, well, okay, it's not going to stay down forever.
Right.
The stock market's dropped so people make money. When it goes back up, you know, it's a manipulative thing. But if they just don't blink and keep with the program, China will have to come around. It doesn't really want a trade war because it, you know, it's got a capitalist streak in it. China does. So I still think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I'm on board. You know, and it's rare that you're going to find something that this administration does that I go, yeah, we should be doing this. I'm a little leery that this guy's the guy doing it, but you know, maybe we'll see. We'll see how this goes. Going back to the Trump people, evidently Trump's lawyer, this Dowd, just decided today, goes, he's not listening to me, I quit.
Yeah. Now this was interesting because Dowd was the one that was super aggressive, saying that this nonsense has to stop. He was very aggressive.
Yep.
He's also the lawyer that caused the controversy because he wrote the tweet or took responsibility for the tweet, which kind of made the president look like he knew that Flynn was lying, you know, and it made the president look bad, and he took responsibility for it. But he, again, was the aggressive lawyer saying this, you know, this has got to end, this is nonsense, etc. So then all of a sudden, the rest of the legal team sort of feels he went too far. They bring in this DeGenova guy, is his name, and it blindsided Dowd, who's head of the legal team. He's not just a lawyer, and he said, okay, I'm out of here.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this, and would you want to have Trump as a client? I mean, honestly, there's a guy who doesn't listen to anything. I mean, I think Dowd is right. If I were advising him, I would say, you don't want to testify in front of Mueller. You definitely don't want to open it. You're not good at it. Don't do it.
Well, I mean, and this looks really bad because when your legal team quits on you, when people get in trouble, staff quit. But usually your legal team doesn't quit. So it's not a good sign.
Not a good sign. And Trump evidently said that Facebook helped Obama too. Is this what we're hearing?
Well, yes. You know, I think that I think it's not the issue, honestly, on Facebook of did it help Trump or did it help Obama, because somebody that worked for Obama that was a techie said, yes, we mined some information. And I hope they don't get caught up on those aspects. I think it's the question of what did Facebook, you know, tell this entity, this Cambridge entity? Did they follow deleting the data? Should they have had the data in the first place? I think these are all going to be questions. But, you know, another thing, too, on Facebook Messenger, and I'm not a tech guy, my goodness, by any stretch of imagination, Rick, but if you click onto it, I remember with the app, it says, can I access your contacts? Can I access your pictures? So I think anything you do, you've got to be leery.
Oh, no, and that's why, you know, people have asked me over the last couple of years why I don't do a lot on Facebook. We post the audio from the show, and that's about it. I don't get into, you know, into posting stuff. I certainly don't take any of the little idiotic quizzes or IQ tests or any of that stuff. Because any thoughtful, rational, reasonable, cogent-minded person is going to go, they're collecting this stuff. Why do I want to give them this kind of insight into my mind? And we do it so without thinking, so willy-nilly. Sure. And you know, it's not surprising to me that somebody's collecting all of this stuff.
And they make money because look, Facebook has went from years back of family and friends and pictures to where it wants to see what you and I and everybody else have got our eyes on, because it monetizes it, and that's how it makes money.
Yep, and that's the other thing I said today. I go, as soon as it stopped being about social media and about getting me to buy stuff is the other part of when I just, nope, done. Done. I use Twitter more than for social media stuff, more than anything else. Let's finally, evidently, would it be great to have Joe Biden and Trump, kind of like a pay-per-view Friday night, duking it out kind of thing? Wouldn't that be fun?
No, it wouldn't. I'll tell you though, and I served with Joe Biden when he was a senator. Enjoyed working with he in his office. I really did. I think he's a great guy. He really is. Personally, I've been around him. But I'll tell you, Joe likes to talk. Of course, so does Trump. But what they would do is they would distract Joe and tell him to talk, tell him his shoes untied, and then Trump would take the punch. I think that's what would happen. Can you imagine those two running against each other? Seriously, think about it for a second. Because they both basically attacked each other physically on Twitter.
Yep. No, I mean, it would be interesting. I mean, both people who, like you said, love to run the mouth. Joe Biden has been a gaffe machine in the past. So, a guy who doesn't filter is has a much better filter than Trump does. But I could see that in the heat of a moment going away. It could be a knockdown, ugly affair.
It would be interesting. Very fascinating.
Yeah. And finally, the reason for Biden today, evidently they've announced or are announcing, their board for the Biden Institute Policy Advisory Board. Mm-hmm. Anybody on there we know?
I looked through the names. I don't know anybody. I must be out of it. I don't know.
I was expecting big names.
You're not on there, are you?
No, I'm not on there. I don't do that stuff.
Okay.
There are too many legal liabilities and insurance and all that you got to worry about. Okay. There you go. Bob, I appreciate the time, man. And hey,
thank you, Rick.
Sleep well tonight knowing John Bolton is the National Security Adivsor.
I am breathless. I don't know what to think.
Sleep
well. You've ruined my day. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bob Ney, Talk Media News.
Thank you.
Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Real quick, before the top of the hour, hour two, we're going to talk with our good friend Chris Stroop about how crazy the right-wing evangelicals have gone. Look at the bombing in Houston, and also a little bit about, just really the incestuous relationship of the right wing and the evangelical community. But I had to get this out first. Evidently, Kellyanne Conway was giving a spiel at the Generation Next Summit. And I guess this is just an updated version of Just Say No, but in a very Trumpian way. She said, on our college campuses, you folks are reading the labels. They won't put any sugar in their bodies. They won't eat carbs anymore. And they're very, very fastidious about what goes into their body. And then you buy street drugs for $5 or $10. It's laced with fentanyl. And that's it. She says, so my short advice is eat the ice cream, have the French fries, and don't buy the street drugs. What? I mean, is this the updated Just Say No? I mean, could you come up with nothing better than you're talking to college-age students? Just have ice cream and French fries. It'll be okay. It'll all work out. Trust me. Literally speechless. And, I got to be honest, though. This idiotic statement of hers made me have the don't do drugs speech with my 15-year-old daughter. Go, you know not to do the drugs, right? You got that? Don't listen to people like this who are just plain out there. Maybe she was doing too many drugs at one point. I don't know. But stay away from these people who obviously too much in the way of drugs. And finally, the Bozo the Clown. You may remember Bozo. He was around from late 50s all the way through the 70s. He passed away today. He was 89 years old. Sad. So yes, I did pair the death of Bozo the Clown with the death of America and Kellyanne Conway. You figure that out. I'll take a quick break. Right back with hour 2. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
The man who sends the investor class diving for their tax shelters. Rick Smith.
The rich pay too much taxes. The poor get way too much. Instead of schools, build prisons and lock the children up. We won't believe those lies again, because God is a Republican.
Yes, and he is thrilled that the end of the world is coming. John Bolton, the National Security Advisor. I got to tell you, the Left Behind people have got to be tickled pink. Absolutely, positively, all tingly in the panties. With the mustachioed neocon as the top security advisor. That has just got to be sending those Left Behind folks just, wow, thrilled and all giddy. Here to talk about that. Also, a little bit about the bombing down in Austin. Asked our good friend Christopher Stroop to come talk with us. He's the creator of Empty Pews and You Don't Know Evangelical hashtags. Also a political writer. Does some amazing stuff on the ex-evangelical movement. Chris, thanks for taking time for us.
You bet, Rick. It's always great to be on, and thanks for that introduction.
So what do you think of this? What do you think of John Bolton and National Security Advisor? Do you think I'm right? Do you think the Left Behinders are all getting ready to pack?
Well, I mean, they like him because he's conspiratorial like them, you know, and there's always this kind of tension in those communities between wanting to act in ways that might bring about the rapture or the end of the world, and simply, you know, wanting to be ready for it, but you have to fight the Antichrist or you have to fight the forces of Antichrist, you know. They're not going to be upset about war in the Middle East. I mean, generally, that would make them happy because they expect it to happen. They expect it to precede the second coming, and they don't really believe peace in the Middle East is possible.
And, I talk to people who, don't know anything about, and it's amazing how well the evangelical community has kept that whole best-selling series of novels out of mainstream thought, at least in my world. And when you explain, what they're talking about and what they want, most people look at me and go, no, that's not possible. I'm going, yeah, they think a giant spaceship's going to come take them away. And the rest of us are all going to be slaughtered.
Yeah, well, for the most part, not a literal spaceship, but Jesus appearing in the sky and taking the people who are truly saved back up to heaven. A whole lot of kids had a lot of terror around that thought. I mean, I wrote an essay about growing up in the end times. We've used the hashtag rapture anxiety. So if people want to see just sort of how terrorizing it is for children to grow up being told, you probably won't have a career, you probably won't graduate from college, you probably won't get married because Christ is coming back anytime. And also being prepared to be persecuted because persecution of Christians is supposed to ramp up before Christ comes back. Yeah, search that hashtag rapture anxiety. You'll see a lot of disturbing stories.
And the reason I bring that up is for just where you went, because I've seen various stories. I remember the Jesus Camp movie where this girl is just weeping uncontrollably for what I thought was almost no reason whatsoever. And I look at this kid down in Austin who now they're the headlines are good came from a good godly family, and I'm going, if this kid was Muslim, it would be terrorist attacks area. And there's a huge difference between Christian terrorists, which I'm saying this kid was, and Muslim terrorists, evidently according to our media, but also on how we look at them and where they come from.
Yeah, in the way that we treat them, absolutely there is a huge difference. So, when you look at domestic terrorism, particularly terrorism carried out usually by right-wing white men, They're written off as lone wolves, mentally ill. They're completely sort of separated artificially from the ideological environment in which they exist and live and think, as if these awful ideas that they espouse don't have any direct relationship to violence, and they clearly do. And we do treat people of color and Muslims with a completely different standard. Christianity is not always benign. Religion is not always benign. It's my position that fundamentalism is something that takes place within religion. So, progressive Christianity, certainly that's real Christianity, but so is fundamentalist Christianity, like the type that I grew up with. From kind of external sociological perspective, you can't say that one is fake and the other is real. It's just religion has the potential to be progressive or to be very destructive and conservative.
Yeah, I always say, it's anything you take to the extreme is bad for you. You breathe too much oxygen, you're going to die. You drink too much water, you're going to drown. Anything to the excess, to the extreme, not good.
Yeah, and so, Mark Anthony Condit, his family, they have the hallmarks of a typical Christian right family. I mean, we know that they were a homeschooling family. His mother, Deneen, homeschooled all of her children. She sells Amway. Multi-level marketing is disproportionately popular on the Christian right. In his old blog from 2012, he used some pretty typical Christian right talking points. But there's another thing that's very telling, besides some of the details that have emerged from their business websites, which are pretty weird and out there. One of the homeschooling groups in which he was involved, where they would get together and do outdoor activities, including things as innocuous as water balloon fights, but also shooting, archery, fighting, role-playing. Apparently, I suspect, end times preparation sort of stuff, was called Riot, R-I-O-T, for Righteous Invasion of Truth. It seems that no journalists or pundits, to my knowledge at this point, have picked up on this, but ex-evangelicals on Twitter have picked up on this. Now, that is the title of an album by a contemporary Christian artist, and I use the term artist very loosely, Carman, that's C-A-R-M-A-N, that was released in 1995, and that album, the videos, the different cuts from it, they've got some pretty violent and militant lyrics, stuff that would remind you of Jesus Camp. In fact, I pulled them up to refresh my memory a bit here. My family didn't listen to Carman that much, but I did hear some of his stuff back in the day, and I believe I went to one of his concerts once. I've got kind of a vague memory of that. But so, this was covered in, I think, BuzzFeed, that they had this homeschooling group called Righteous Invasion of Truth, and nobody made the connection to the Christian right subculture. So here are the lyrics from the title track, Riot, which is spelled with all capital letters, the period between each one. So let me find some of the more violent lyrics here. Before this church is raptured, there's no way we're going to leave here quiet. We want a righteous invasion of truth. We want a riot. Righteous, to conform to the Bible, invasion, an armed attack of truth, the real state of affairs, like a church on the move that will not double back from the fight. They named themselves after, this album from 1995.
Wow. And, you hear this, and I've had people tell me that the evangelical right, the people who do the homeschooling, and look, there are some, I've had people who say, these evangelicals have given the homeschoolers a really bad name, which may be true, but virtually every homeschooler I know is one of these, way out kind of people. Not that all homeschoolers are, just all the ones that I've met. And they all have this view that they had children and multiple children to be Christian warriors. So when I hear you lay this out, that it's even, further back than I can imagine, it scares the living what out of me.
Yeah, well, so homeschooling really starts to take off in the 1980s, and just now there's a first generation of homeschooled kids who were educated and subjected to really extremist views, sometimes hardcore physical and sexual abuse, extremes of isolation and control by narcissistic parents, because homeschooling is virtually unregulated, and that's largely thanks to the lobbying of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association, which was founded, I believe, in the 80s. It started changing the laws and making it easier and easier to homeschool, and we really need to push back against them. Without necessarily saying you've got to get rid of homeschooling, I'd like to give a shout out again to Catherine Brightville, who's a real expert on this and who also was homeschooled in a radical Christian right environment and was a culture warrior on front lines protesting abortion clinics and that sort of thing. She's now a legislative analyst for the Coalition for Responsible Homeschooling. That's a very good organization. But while it's hard to get figures on why exactly people are homeschooling, precise figures anyway, an estimate that I looked at this morning, I looked back at a great article by Catherine Joyce, precisely on homeschoolers speaking out against the abuses that they experienced being homeschooled in the 1980s and 90s, an article that she wrote in Prospect Magazine in 2014. She was looking at the current literature on homeschooling at that time and said that experts estimate that 2/3 to 3/4 of homeschooling in the United States is done by Christian fundamentalists. That figure might be a little dated. It's my anecdotal impression that homeschooling has become more popular among liberals in recent years, but it is a very high proportion, nevertheless, of homeschool curriculums that's designed for Christian fundamentalists, and it's a very high proportion of homeschool families who are Christian fundamentalists. And in fact, you sometimes hear about the curriculum transforming more mainstream and moderate Christians into radicals, or feeding into the abusive and narcissistic tendencies of parents who now have divine authority to do whatever they want.
And as we saw in California, to some really in some cases, some deadly consequences, or, just, you look at the stories of those kids that were, crated, and you see these stories and it's maddening.
It is really, really awful and disturbing. And, the Coalition for Responsible Home Education, their solution to this would be to have just some sensible regulations. You've got to have some standards. You've got to have some checks to make sure that children are not being abused in homeschooling environments. It is very widespread, and the Homeschool Legal Defense Association does everything it can to cover that up and protect the abusers.
Right. Well, what do you say to the person, Chris, who goes, these people, there's just a handful of people who've gone too far. They're not all like this. Maybe you're exaggerating how large the crazy sect of the evangelical community is. What do you say to them?
Well, I would say that evangelical extremism or sort of hardline paranoid style politics comes in degrees, and certainly they are conservative white evangelicals are a minority of the U.S. population, but they're one that absolutely has disproportionate power because they've built up a huge lobbying infrastructure since the 1970s, building on some smaller scale efforts that were made in the 50s and 60s, as largely coming out of the fight against communism. It was the Cold War that allowed extreme radical evangelicals to re-enter the American mainstream, as they'd been kind of shunted aside after the Scopes trial, which was national embarrassment for them, in 1925. But they didn't go away. And with the atomic bomb, America had gotten into a very apocalyptic mood, and we were looking at the world in terms of good versus evil after World War II, with the Soviet Union versus the United States. Evangelical apocalypse believers were able to re-enter the mainstream and become a part of the conversation. And when that sort of general early Cold War consensus around how we had to be a religious country to fight the godless commies, and this is why in 1954 we added "Under God to the Pledge of Allegiance," in 1956 "In God We Trust" became the motto of the United States. When in the 60s, with the counterculture and the civil rights movement, that consensus starts to break down, you have evangelicals double down, and in the 70s in particular start to build up ultimately quite powerful political coalitions and organizations. And now Donald Trump's cabinet is full of them, and there's this radical pastor, Ralph Drollinger of Capitol Ministries, who hosts a Bible study with most of Trump's cabinet members every week. They have power.
And the thing that's scary is most people, as you're laying this stuff out, most people haven't even dreamt that that's actually happened.
Yeah, it's the media really needs to wake up to this. I mean, one of the points that I try to stress regularly on Twitter, on my blog, is that we need to change the national conversation around evangelicals, because they are homegrown extremists to varying degrees. I mean, I went to a Christian school that would be considered one of the more moderate ones because it liked Billy Graham, as opposed to thinking that Billy Graham was a heretic who was going to hell because he bailed Martin Luther King out of jail. I mean, there are degrees of fundamentalism. But my school nevertheless taught young earth creationism. It also had AP biology, and so I took that class. Our instructor, He told us to read the evolution chapters on our own and regurgitate them for the AP exam, but then he also showed us young Earth creationist propaganda. And he was an apocalyptic mystic who would spend about half the class period on these devotional thoughts that he would have, and they were so bizarre. And in the fall, they were always about how the rapture was probably going to happen this year around Yom Kippur. I'm not making this up.
Wow. Of course, right around a Jewish holiday, which, wow. So, when as someone growing up under this, because, I'm looking at this kid in Austin and I'm going, how does somebody who's, everyone says a decent kid, didn't, cause any trouble so much, how does somebody, deal with a lifetime of what you've laid out is there's no hope for tomorrow. It's all going to end. Why do I have to do anything, study? Why do I have to get a job? Why do I do anything at all when it's all coming to an end? And that kind of apocalyptic view of, I'm struggling to understand, how someone functions in that kind of a thought process.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's weird. Obviously, a lot of us kids were really, really troubled being indoctrinated in this as children, and very much in this hardline black and white, good versus evil sort of thinking. We had our Christian communities, and everything else was the world, and the world out there was corrupted by Satan and dangerous, and you had to be careful with it because you could open yourself up to demonic influences. I mean, that was something that we really believed in too, witchcraft, devils, the devil, demons. My family let my sister and me trick-or-treat on Halloween, which is kind of a big deal for that, for this group, because a lot of people don't. They go to church harvest festivals instead, or some people just spend the evening praying against the demons that they believe are very active on Halloween. And we did believe that. We were not allowed to have scary costumes. My mom wouldn't even let us say trick-or-treat. We had to say Happy Halloween instead, but, the neighbors were nice and still gave us candy.
Literally speechless. So let me bring this back around then, because again, you look at this stuff and it's happening right before our eyes. Is there a way to legislate crazy? I mean, because it seems to me that this is borderline crazy.
Well, it is, but the extent to which the state can interfere in this sort of thing, that's a very tricky and thorny question. When it comes to homeschooling, I think that homeschooling should be regulated to make sure that it's up to standard and that children aren't being abused. When it comes to schooling, so I went to private Christian schools, which were really quite radical. For the one that I went to in middle school in Colorado Springs, 1993 to 1995, was even more radical than the one that I graduated from in Indianapolis. At least we could not provide them with state and federal funding to do what they do. Why do we have these voucher programs which cultivate radical Christian extremism in the United States?
Yeah, I mean, I look at Betsy DeVos, and we talk about this often. The fact that they want to take money from public schools to give to these charter schools or these private schools, or the goal, as I understand it, you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, is to eventually pay the homeschoolers to homeschool their children, because we're trying to affix them a dollar amount to each child's head. So that, in my view, eventually all the homeschoolers can cash in as well, especially the ones who have 20 kids.
I mean, possibly. I'm not totally sure about that, but I know that many people in these circles, the more extremes of the extremes, will actually admit, if you kind of force them into it, back them into a corner in conversation, that they would like to see all public education destroyed. They don't believe it's godly. They believe that the state doing things is idolatry. I mean, other than the collective defense and maybe some infrastructure. If the state provides any kind of social programs, they see that as taking the place of God. The really thoroughgoing Christian Reconstructionists and Dominionist ideologues don't believe in public schooling. They believe it should all be done by private Christian schools or church schools or homeschooling, and they have debates about that. Some see homeschooling as the more pure version because they believe that God has given specifically fathers total authority over their children.
Wow.
They believe this hierarchy. You can find a lot of Christian right materials that are really quite explicit about this, that, we live in a hierarchical world where if people are obedient to God and not rebelling against God, then, men have been placed over women and children. And they are to have absolute authority in the family. The state's not supposed to interfere. Fortunately, we have some laws for which the state can interfere in cases of abuse, but it's difficult to do, and I do think there are too many religious exemptions. When it comes to faith healing communities, for example, there are a lot of graveyards out in certain states where faith healing is very common, where you can read from the dates on their gravestones that very small children have died of preventable diseases because their parents refused to get them modern medicine and practice only prayer and faith healing. I personally believe that they should be held to the same standards and laws against gross neglect as any other parent who just neglects their children without a religious quote-unquote justification for that neglect.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Well, last question I've got for you, and I look at again back to this kid in Austin. I'm actually surprised there aren't more of these stories going on. Are these things happening and we're just not paying attention to it, or is this just a maybe one of those things that just who knows what made this kid do what he did?
I mean, we don't 100% know his motivations. We can only speculate at this point, and unless we can prove political motivation, then this can't technically be considered terrorism under the law, though I think that in the way that we talk about terrorism day to day, we can certainly call this terrorism. And it seems very likely that his indoctrination, childhood indoctrination, extreme Christian right ideology is going to be a key factor. I suspect that we'll find that out if we're able to get more information about what happened here. But yes, I mean, extreme cases of abuse and violence in homeschooling and other Christian right communities, it's not that uncommon. There's a great website, Homeschoolers Anonymous, where they did a whole series on when homeschooling turns violent. And so that's out there that people can look at. So yeah, ideas have consequences, right? Conservatives used to like saying that. It's true, but conservative ideas also have consequences, right? And the extreme right is really the danger that we need to be fearing in the United States.
I'm with you. Chris, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. Thanks so much.
You bet, Rick. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Always good talking to you. And I'm always scary as hell, I got to be honest. Wow. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
Think of all the roads. Think of all their crossings. Taking steps is easy. Standing still is hard. Remember all their faces. Remember all their voices. Everything is different the second time around.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1972. That was the day the Equal Rights Amendment passed the U.S. Senate and moved to the states for ratification. It had passed the House the previous fall. Alice Paul and Crystal Eastman of the National Women's Party first wrote the ERA in the 1920s. It was introduced to Congress in 1923. The revised version that Congress passed in 1971 and 1972 stated simply, equality of rights under the law shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. The amendment needed 38 states to ratify by March of 1979 in order to pass. 35 states ratified the amendment, but 5 states later rescinded ratification. The 38-state requirement was never met. The decades-long debate among women's rights advocates often centered on formal equality versus protective legislation for women workers. But an amendment establishing equality meant the end to restrictive discriminatory laws. These included laws imposing restriction on a woman's right to buy or sell property or to conduct a business, the age at which women could marry, differing admission standards for boys and girls in tax-supported educational institutions, laws establishing different jail sentences by sex for identical crimes, regulations denying unemployment compensation payments to pregnant women who are still able and willing to work, and much more. The far right and religious fundamentalists of all faiths fiercely opposed the ERA, fearing it would erode traditional gender roles. Many progressives and the labor movement also opposed it for many years on the basis that hard-won protective legislation would be lost. It is striking that, as of 2017, there is still no clear legal codification of women's equal status to men.
America. The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So a guy in Ohio, evidently he has been charged with a federal hate crime for a vicious attack on someone that he believed was Jewish. Turns out, and this is one of those moments where you go, really? You're going to attack a guy because you think he's Jewish? Beat him up, bruised his ribs, fractured his eye socket, a real beating. Turns out, guy wasn't Jewish after all. Actually was a Christian, like this guy claimed that he was. And if convicted, this guy, Ismar Koch, he could face up to 10 years in prison for the beating. And you go, at some point, do we not have to get rid of these crazy people? And I remember my first experience with one of the really way out, extreme evangelical Baptists. I was in high school. It was a friend of mine. We went to school together. His father was just plain nuts on every front. And, both kids completely rebelled, and, they were, they were into everything. They were, doing all kinds of stuff, trying to rebel. I mean, trying to get caught. And I still remember the one time that the father didn't like his hair as long as it was, wanted a crew cut on the kid, and literally attempted to tie him to the bed naked and cut his hair. And as he broke loose, was beating him with a hose. And, he showed up at our house with no clothes on, with a sheet wrapped around him. And the police came, and it was nothing. They took the kid right back. They had a couple of words. Hey, don't do it. And that was it. And I go back to, thinking of that moment and thinking of just how crazy this kid's father was, and ultimately the mother as well, for allowing it to happen, and how they had been thrown out of one radical church after another. And I remember, as a kid, I went to church. We did the whole weekend. You go during the holidays, you go on Sundays. But they were going like 4 or 5 nights a week, and it was this really strict kind of wow. And it was that mentality that we're building, this warrior mentality that, there's going to be this is going back into the 80s, as Chris pointed out. And it didn't really dawn on me that this was part of a movement until just a couple of years ago with that movie Jesus Camp, where I was going, wow, this stuff is all coordinated. And then you look around and you look at the fact that they're all intertwined. They've built an entire empire of media. They've built an entire empire of business. Look at Amway, billionaire Betsy. And it's not surprising that the kid's mother in Austin was an Amway salesperson. And all of these connections and how they all are, building their own kind of, their own kind of nation within a nation, with the goal of taking it down, with the goal of completely changing our laws to fit their narrow, their very simple, extreme tract of thinking. And it's just, it's one of these things where, I have people like Chris on to talk about just how crazy some of this stuff has gotten, because I find that most people, when you try and explain that, hey, this is how, they don't believe you. They're going, that can't happen here. It's happening everywhere. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show.
Yes, I'm working all the time. It seems to me I could live my life a lot better than I think I am. I guess that's why they call me the working man.
Making the blue blood see red. The Rick Smith Show.
If you had a message for Washington right now, what would it be?
We need help. Please.
Puerto Rico still in the grip of crisis 6 months after Hurricane Maria, while new documents reveal Trump's FEMA failed to respond to calls for assistance.
We see it in bottle after bottle, and we see it in brand after brand.
Your bottled water is likely contaminated with microscopic plastic. Plus,
the world's last male northern white rhino has died.
Another charismatic species slips into extinction because of humans.
All of those stories and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Ivanka has been getting some heat for tweeting this picture of herself dressed like Science Barbie. Just like a real Barbie, she has no scientific credentials, and the space where her heart should be is a hollow plastic shell.
Harsh. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I've got something that will suffice today for some good news.
And we could use it.
The $1.3 trillion government-wide spending bill released late on Wednesday rejects Donald Trump's proposal to slash the EPA budget by 31%. Senior lawmakers have given the agency $8.1 billion for fiscal year 2018. That keeps the spending levels the same as it was in 2017. So it still needs to pass both houses of Congress before Friday, when the government could shut down if this doesn't pass. But this looks like good news. In addition to that $8.1 billion for the EPA in the main section of the bill, they also give $763 million in another part of the bill for various other EPA programs related to water infrastructure, cleaning up polluted Superfund sites, and so forth.
Well, that is some good news. It's nice that the EPA's budget will get a temporary reprieve.
It is. So now that I've found good news, how are you going to ruin it all for us today?
Well, Tuesday marked 6 months since Hurricane Maria made landfall in Puerto Rico as a Category 4 storm. It caused catastrophic damage and triggered the longest blackout in United States history. Yes, there is progress in the island's recovery, but blackouts are frequent, and more than 100,000 residents are still without power in rural areas. Maria caused roughly $100 billion in damage to Puerto Rico, but Congress so far has approved only $23 billion in disaster assistance, and AP reports only a fraction of that has been spent in Puerto Rico. NPR reports that FEMA has denied 60% of applications to repair homes because many residents don't have documentation to prove they own them. And a new AP report now underscores the federal government's lack of preparation and its botched response. Emails and text messages released by Democratic Representative Elijah Cummings of Maryland indicate that in the week immediately after the hurricane, FEMA officials simply did not respond to desperate requests for fuel supplies from grocery stores and even Walmart, leading to the spoilage of tons of food amid a hunger crisis.
Wasn't that right around the same time that Donald Trump was giving himself an A+ for his response with FEMA to the crisis?
Yes, it is.
Imagine that.
Meanwhile, a new study finds that rivers are a significant source of plastic pollution in the ocean. Researchers have found that large storms that flood rivers end up washing tons of plastic litter out to sea. One single storm in northwestern England back in 2015 flushed nearly a metric ton of microplastic pollution into the ocean. And plastic in the rivers isn't just polluting the ocean, it's also in your bottled water. A new study finds that plastic bottled water is likely contaminated with microplastic. Researchers at the State University of New York tested more than 250 bottles across 11 brands and found that 93% of those bottled water samples contained tiny microscopic pieces of plastic. In an interview with the BBC, lead researcher Sherry Mason said much more study needs to be done on the health impacts of ingesting plastic.
These are the particles that can make their way across the gastrointestinal tract. We see it in bottle after bottle, and we see it in brand after brand.
The World Health Organization has announced it will launch a study on the effect of microplastics on public health, and some countries have begun phasing out single-use plastic to reduce plastic pollution. Finally, sad news in Kenya, where the world's last male northern white rhino has died. It marks the effective extinction of the subspecies of the iconic animals. All rhino species are being driven to extinction by humans through habitat loss and poaching. The extinction news comes just days after the Trump administration reversed a ban on importation of endangered animal body parts. And just days after Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke announced a new taxpayer-funded commission to promote big game hunting, stuffed with big game trophy hunters.
Yep, I knew you would ruin my good news.
Sorry.
For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us, follow us, and share us worldwide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. For some time, I've been saying, look, there's a movement in this country, and the evangelicals are part of this. You look at billionaire Betsy, at the Secretary of the Department of Education, pushing this idea of privatizing public education, moving it into the realm of charter schools, which I know are public money. We love to say that they're public schools. Yeah, they're public money, but run by private interests, and I would argue interests that we pay mightily for that privilege. Obviously, and oddly enough, they don't do any better than the public schools, which is weird. Also, these private schools they want to fund. But more importantly, what they want to do is they want to have robots and everything online. I look where I'm at in Pennsylvania with the cyber charter stuff. That's where they see the future. So we can get rid of teachers altogether. They've already done it in higher education. No longer do you have professors. You have facilitators. That is really the right wing, the moneyed interest. That's where they want to go with education. Here to talk about what's going on in Wisconsin as they are moving towards privatization and also, as I've been saying, turning educators into factory workers. I've asked Amy Bahena to come talk with us. She is an educator there in Wisconsin. Amy, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Rick.
So am I off base here in saying that, there's a movement in this country that wants to not just privatize our public education and our public schools, but, do away with you? Have robots or have flow charts and facilitators instead of actual qualified teachers?
It's not too far-fetched to say that, Rick. We are facing a turning point in education where they are trying to push through all of the processes, the pedagogy that we learn through our educator preparation courses in a very short turnaround for very little money. And what's happening is that they're deprofessionalizing our profession and taking away everything that we know about what's good for kids and bringing it down to the lowest price point, the fastest, the cheapest, and bottom line, it's not good for kids.
Well, I mean, this is what happens when you turn education into Education Incorporated. It's all about squeezing the quarter until the eagle screams. It's all about how much they can bleed out of a system to put in their pockets and, take from yours and take from the future of the kids.
Absolutely. And it makes me sick to my stomach as a career educator and someone who cares deeply about my own children's education and the education of all kids in this country. And I think everybody needs to start paying attention to it.
Now, we hear these silver bullet plans. And like when I grew up in the 1970s, I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. And what the great idea then is we'll take poor kids from one side of the city, we'll put them on these yellow boxes on wheels, and we'll drive them all the way to a poor area on the other side of the city. And we'll just mix up a whole bunch of poor kids. And that was going to fix the crumbling schools, the lack of resources, and the failing school system. It didn't work, obviously. But we seem to have these silver bullet processes mostly for poor kids. It doesn't seem to get to the suburbs, or is that even now trickling into the suburbs?
Well, actually, I think that the school choice movement is something that they're branding as a way to help our poorest kids, our minority kids who have shown to be on the lower achieving end of the achievement gap. And it's for many reasons, having years and years and decades of education politics and policies that have not supported their whole child needs. And what's happening is now we have the public schools with their funding issues and the Common Core issues, and there's just so much going on, and we're trying to battle so many things that now they're swinging the other way with school choice. They're trying to create all of these voucher schools and charter schools, and what ends up happening is that the same privileged kids are able to take advantage of those choices, and the other kids are left behind.
Yeah, I mean, and in schools, public schools that are less well funded and arguably worse off by having fewer resources, with more kids who have more and greater needs. In fact, just today, and this is one of those weird kind of, to tell you how often I'm inundated with right-wing nonsense. The Americans for Prosperity group here in Pennsylvania, they just evidently kicked off their Education Freedom Program. Their new initiative here in Pennsylvania, Ed Freedom PA, is their pitch to do just what you were saying, to give the illusion that there's some choice out there. And I would argue that a defunded public school and a charter school or private school with shiny doorknobs, not really a choice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When there are restrictions on transportation, if the parent needs to provide that, if there are uniform costs, if there are participation fees, it then becomes a layer of public school that our minority and low-income students can't attain. Their parents are automatically disqualified. Even if they say the doors are open, it's truly not a choice for them. And so then we're siphoning off what some people would call the cream of the crop and leaving our disadvantaged kids behind in an environment where they don't have any other kids to kind of raise that bar, to raise the tide and help their school be successful, in addition to taking the much needed funds away to form these specialized programs and these specialized campuses. You're absolutely right. And
that's the weird thing to me. And as someone who kind of gets how this game is being played out in front of us, that you've got these other entities who are, like, as you pointed out, able to pick the cream of the crop, because it's not the parents have much choice. It's these schools picking who they want, and the public schools being saddled with what they don't want. You would think, one would think that by being able to choose your team would be far superior, that you would be able to educate these kids, and these kids would be off the charts. But, in the studies that I've seen, they don't do any better. I mean, it doesn't look like they do any better at all. A handful do, but for the most part, it's about the same.
Exactly. And what we're seeing in our area, and I can't speak for the rest of the country, but what we're seeing in our area is that in Wisconsin, we have parental opt-out for any assessments. Well, the private schools that are accepting vouchers or charter schools are able to get all of their parents to agree to sign opt-out forms, and therefore they don't have enough numbers to report. Like, their entire school opts out of standardized assessments. And so that you can't even compare apples to oranges in this case. It's just not even fair. Now, if a public school were to try to do that, to encourage their parents to opt out, can you imagine what the taxpayers and the legislators would say?
Oh, yeah. I mean, but there have been areas that have done it successfully, where parents have done it. In fact, we've opted our kids out of the standardized tests for years. Simply because
I do too.
I don't see any value in them.
Right. I do too. But as an organization, if we were to do that as public schools,
right, from the superintendent on down,
we would be vilified.
No, you're absolutely right, and I agree with you on that. And so the question becomes, and I ask legislators where I live in Pennsylvania this, whenever we talk about this stuff, okay, you want to have this quote unquote competition, shouldn't they be on the same field or even, I don't know, in the same stadium? And
right.
They're not.
Mm-hmm.
It's very bizarre to me. Now, the other part of this that I did want to ask about, because I've often said that the goal of this, as someone who's taken online higher ed courses in the past, it's no longer about the student teacher interaction. It's really like, back in the 70s, I remember they used to have matchbooks with correspondence courses on the back. It's more like we're turning education and K through 12 education into on the back of the matchbook correspondence courses.
And it's easy to do when you have very tight standards, a la Common Core and Next Gen, and they're easily turned into benchmarks across grade levels, and they're standardized across the entire country. It's really, really easy to kind of have this metric or badge system in place, and it makes it difficult to say that the relationship is important because, well, you can say, well, the student is meeting all of these objectives, and it's depersonalized, even though they're marketing it as personalized learning. It's very Orwellian, I feel, in the way that they're telling us that all of these computerized courses and these interventions that are on computers are personalized for students and allow them to work at their own pace, but they're just marching them along the same path.
Yeah.
It's really, really weird.
One of the things that's kind of scary to me, Amy, is that you see this breaking news with this Cambridge Analytica stuff, and the fact that they were doing all of this psych op stuff where we were taking these quizzes and they were profiling us. Aren't we, by going the path that you've pointed out, creating these individualized computer programs for these kids to follow their entire career? Aren't we actually just mapping out every corner of their mental function to be put out and analyzed and scored in ways to be used, not, I guess, to make them better, but also against them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And for that reason, I upped my child on all the computerized learning courses that he has access to at school.
Now, can parents do that? I mean, because you look at the fact that everything seems to be online. I mean, we're one of the few that our kids don't have, access to computers whenever they want. If there's a project they need to do at school, they get it. But, they're not on the computers all the time. They're not doing the games. They're not doing all that stuff. Is there a way to pull that back when the whole system seems to be, in second grade, here's an iPad? Is there a way to pull back from that?
It's hard, and most people don't know that they have that option. I think parents need to be aware. They need to be very upfront with their teachers and have a good relationship with them, as well as their administrator. And being a teacher myself, I've gone in and had that conversation with them and explained my concerns, and they've been responsive to that and allowed alternate activities for my child during that time that gets to the same content but isn't text-driven. And I'm thankful for that and appreciate that, but people need to assert their rights and talk to their administrators about their concerns.
Yeah, it's we, the parents, having to step forward. You're absolutely right. Yeah. But what do you say to the person, Amy, who says, the standardized tests aren't so bad. Kids get tested all the time.
They do, but the information isn't used in the way that it is to vilify schools, individual educators. It's not used for educator effectiveness. Tests are a normal part of kind of growing up. We had standardized tests, but they've been weaponized. They've been weaponized to label schools as failing and promote them as candidates for replacement with charter schools or voucher schools, and to label schools and track children through their careers. And that's not okay. It's this data-heavy labeling and tracking that it has me unsettled.
Yeah, I'm with you. As we explain to our kids, I tell them I'm not against testing. In fact, I'm a big fan of testing. I think we should be testing kids more often. When I was a kid in school, we got tested every Friday. You learned something throughout the week. On Friday, you took the test to see if you knew it, so that over the weekend you had a chance to at least catch up so that you didn't fall behind. To me, and this is what I explain to my kids, These standardized tests make no sense to me because you're going to take them for 2 weeks in April or March or April, and we don't get the results until November. That makes no sense because there's nothing diagnostic. There's no way to help you to learn what it is you don't know yet. For me, the test should be about, okay, this is something we don't know. Let's make sure you learn it before we move on. That's the diagnostic part. That's important to me. This just collecting data on my kids, I'm not at all on board with.
Absolutely. And, at schools that have multiple layers of testing and intervention, I'm at a very high poverty school with many, many children that need interventions and special groups and accommodations in their testing. We also have a very high ELL population, which has its own set of standardized tests. So literally we are testing about 4 months out of the school year in rotating groups. And, that has a ripple effect across the entire school as far as everyone having to be quiet in the halls and special attention being paid to attendance and breakfast and making sure kids have everything they need to do as well as they can on these tests that we are all going to be judged by. And, it takes a lot out of our building.
I mean, it's scary time. So I guess the question of this is, we're seeing teachers across this country standing up. I mean, you look at West Virginia, the teachers who across the entire state went on strike for better conditions for themselves and better wages, yes, but also building this kind of solidarity that you can take on these issues. And do you see a movement of teachers across the country who have kind of just said, we've had enough of being attacked, we've had enough of being demonized, and we've had enough of our profession being degraded and eventually done away with?
I am hoping. Being part of that Wisconsin uprising when Act 10 was enacted, it's not just about our collective bargaining rights, though, and I think that's what's been, misrepresented. Yes, it's about teacher pay. Yes, it's about professionalism. But more than anything, it's about having a voice to be able to advocate for our kids and not fearing for our livelihood while doing so.
Yeah.
And I do see it increasing throughout the country. We didn't go on strike here in Wisconsin. We were advised not to. But obviously that the momentum has kept going as reforms are sweeping the country and people are not content with what they're seeing in a profession that they chose or that they felt they were called to. And it's building, and teachers are becoming more vocal about the things that they see that are hurting themselves in their profession and the kids too.
I mean, because one of the things that I say is you're getting to the point where, especially in Wisconsin, and I think I remember seeing you there sleeping on the marble floor there in 2011.
Absolutely.
Because we were out there. We actually broadcast from one of the representative's office for 11 days out there. But there's a point at which you go, we have nothing left to lose. And as the attacks are happening, and as they're deprofessionalizing your industry, your career, your vocation, people are going to eventually say, what do I got to lose?
Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting mid-career. I've got 17 years in, and I hope to have at least 17 more. But I've been struck very hard by the deprofessionalization of my career as I've made choices to move from classroom teacher to a school library media specialist here in Wisconsin. The changing of the licensure has been hotly debated and keeps changing just over even the last 2 or 3 years. They keep removing requirements and lowering the bar for professionals to have the positions that we have. And in my case, they removed the requirement for a master's degree to be in the school library and managing a collection and supporting curriculum. They have talked about removing the requirement to have a degree in library science and allow anybody to slide into the position, which I think, as someone who's finishing up her library science degree, is a huge mistake because you learn so much. But it's all because of numbers. And they use this excuse, well, we've got a teacher shortage. Nobody wants to become a librarian. It's too hard. It's too expensive. And my answer to that is we wouldn't do this in any other industry. We wouldn't say, oh, there aren't enough engineers to help design and build that bridge. I guess we're just going to have to lower the requirements so any high school teacher that has any kind of experience with CAD can come in and now design our bridges.
Now, you know what a book is? You know what cement
Right?
looks like? You're in.
Right? Like we wouldn't do that anywhere else. We would find incentives and ways to make it attractive, but we're going the other way. And deprofessionalizing, it's demoralizing. It's really hard. I still have a passion for what I do, and as do all of the colleagues that I work with. But it's hard to do it knowing that the people that are making the rules don't understand that you need to have all of the pedagogy, all of the ethical training, all of the technical training that goes along with it in order to do the best job for our kids. For some reason in education, it's okay to just do away with that.
Yeah, I mean it's scary, and it's not just
it is.
It's not just Republicans either. I mean, I go back to the Obama years and all the Teach for America stuff that I was completely against. Again, deprofessionalizing the profession by bringing someone who's going to spend a couple of years there and then move on to something else. I got to tell you, that's just not the way we should have been going. Just a thought.
Absolutely.
So, last question I've got for you. What do you want people? What do you want people to do tomorrow? What should parents be doing? Because maybe for the first time they're hearing this. What action would you give them?
Talk to your legislators and get out and vote. I mean, those are the two biggest things that we can do.
It always comes back to that. Amy, I appreciate your time. Thank you for the work you do, and if no one else thanks you, let me be the one who does.
Thank you so much, Rick.
Good stuff. I appreciate it, Amy. And she's right. I mean, you look at the whole push towards privatization and deprofessionalization right smacking us in the face. We'll take a quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. Are you fascist?
So, I remember when, I still remember the day we decided that we were going to opt our oldest daughter out of the test. It was, she was in 5th grade at the time. And it was like the first time that they had really, they had hammered these tests through. And, I remember, my wife telling me the story that, my older daughter was playing, school with the 2 younger kids, and not in a mean way or anything, saying, if we don't pass these tests, you got to learn this stuff. If you don't pass these, they're gonna take money from the school and they're gonna end up closing the school. And she told me this, and I'm like, how is this filtering into my 5th grader's mind that she's now polluting my younger kids with? Where's this coming from? And it was coming from the teachers who were putting pressure on the kids that, you got to pay attention to this stuff, and not in a mean way. It's just the way that they were pushing this testing on them. And this was during the Obama years, where, the no child's behind left or whatever, no dime left behind or whatever they were calling it, where the idea was, we're going to take money away from the kids who were struggling. So if a school didn't, and yes, I know it started off during the George W. Bush years and went right on through. And don't get me started on Arnie Duncan and Obama's education guide, because while he was a lot better and a lot more intelligent than Betsy DeVos, he was not a great friend of public education. He was pushing the charters, which is why I think a lot of the problems that we're in came from that as well. But this whole push to these tests got these kids focused solely on doing this. And I was arguing back then that eventually they're going to change the entire day around to just focusing on, we have to pass the test, instead of training critical thinking kids to love learning. And this is what I tell my kids all the time. What you're learning right now is you're learning how to learn, because you're going to need to learn your entire life. Every day you're going to learn something new. You're going to have multiple career choices. You're going to changes over the time, and you're going to have to learn new things throughout your whole life. So you have to learn the process of learning, and you have to love it. And my fear is right from the beginning, they're smacking these kids down with, they got to pass these tests. Fill in the bubble. Fill in the bubble. it's scary stuff to me, and which is why we said no, not doing it, not doing it at all. And oddly enough, you know, a lot of other parents didn't come along. It's we live in interesting times. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. The testing good? Is it bad? What do you think? Share that. John Bolton, National Security Advisor. Are we all dead tomorrow? rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com is where you go to get the podcast and download the app on your smartphone. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show.